Q&A chat.
Okay.
Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Anti-Hateful Task Force meeting. Regarding Zoom, we have the chat disabled and the Q&A function available. For guests participating in Zoom, feel free to ask any of your questions through the Q&A function. The cohort members will be posting information related to cohort updates or links through the chat.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Selena Mendy Singleton. I am with the Montgomery County Council and one of the people who is staffing the Anti-Hate Task Force. Bertha?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Berta Lidia Cersosimo, and I am the other council staffer assisting with the work of the Anti-Hate Task Force.
I'm just going to take a few seconds to run through the agenda. Council President Evan Glass is here and he's going to give a welcome. And then we're going to turn to Adile Sharif to start off with the Muslim cohort report. There will be a discussion and then we will announce the next full task force meeting and adjourn. So now we're going to welcome Council President Glass.
Thank you very much, Selena. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us this evening for the Anti-Hate Task Force. And tonight we're going to be receiving the recommendations from the Muslim cohort. And as we have this extremely important conversation, it's important to recognize the hostilities that are occurring in Israel and in Gaza right now. The eyes of the world are watching. We're watching the loss of life, the destruction, the pain. It's personal for many of us. And I know that we are all feeling a lot of emotions, which is why it's really important to remember that the focus on this conversation is to ensure that everyone in Montgomery County feels safe and seen and welcome for who they are. That is the goal of the Anti-Hate Task Force. And the goal of tonight's discussion is to hear from members of our Muslim community about their thoughts and concerns about living here. Last year, in 2022, there was a 10% increase in hate crimes. And we cannot allow our religious or political or personal views to turn into hate. We cannot and should not hate our neighbors. I hope we can all agree on that. And I hope we can all agree that hate has no home here. And so it is important to note that just along with every group, there are differences of opinion. No two people are exactly alike. And so I welcome this evening's discussion. And please remember that we can disagree without being disagreeable, because that is the point of this task force. That's why we're all participating in it. And that's why we're all committed to making Montgomery County a safe and welcoming place for everybody. So thank you for your leadership and dedication. And I look forward to listening to tonight's conversation.
Thank you, President Glass. Now we'll turn it over to the Muslim cohort for their presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Adile Sharif.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Adila, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Muslim cohort for being here tonight. First, we would like to focus on the most important task for tonight, our recommendations. So our first set of recommendations is really for the County Council on how to engage with the community. We have an extremely diverse community. So when you are partnering on different civic topics, please engage with different members of different institutions because they bring important and valuable perspectives from their own backgrounds. When you talking about expanding the structural bias and inequity definitions, it is very important to incorporate Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry as part of the conversation. You need to make sure that you familiarize your networks with manifestations and historic roots of Islamophobia. As we go deeper into the presentation tonight, we will be covering some of those areas. Civic leaders. We have so many task forces in Montgomery County where volunteers are, just like us, task forces are getting together and facilitating and managing programs. It is very important that we include mandatory training, just like we did for the other trainings. It is that we include mandatory training on cultural competency that includes anti-Muslim bigotry and demographics on the diversity of the Muslim community. Again, we will keep emphasizing we are a very diverse community. As far as communication strategies are concerned, ensure that the materials and volunteer engagement opportunities coming via the county channels are disseminated to all these various organizations so that we're not missing engaging all these different Muslim community participants. One of the things that we found through the listening session and the survey and based on our own discussion as well, we're not aware of a central place where we can report hate crimes. Schools do it a different way. County does it a different way, but there's no central place where everybody knows how to report hate crimes. We need a central place where people can go and report this information. And we need to do a PSA. We need to inform the community again and again, if there is a hate crime, how to report it so that we can start counting those numbers. Training, we will focus on that many times, just like the Jewish community did as well in their presentation, and I believe the other cohorts will as well. We need to include anti-Muslim, anti-Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry awareness training modules as part of the diversity training for the workplaces. One of the important things is also incorporating cultural competency and religious literacy training for civic, business, and nonprofit leaders. And how do you make sure that that is happening? You do that for the institutions that are receiving Montgomery County grants. Once they're getting those funds, part of that is making sure that they are taking those diversity trainings at least once a year. From a community engagement perspective, we found the listening session extremely helpful for us. We might do another one again. So we would really encourage county council and county executive to do consistent and regular listening sessions around the county with Muslims and provide follow-up communications related to actions that they find during those sessions. We love the diversity in Montgomery County, so we need to celebrate the history and the diversity. Designate and recognize Muslim American Heritage Month that acknowledges the first Muslims in Maryland. We'll talk about that later, and subsequent contributions across sectors since the founding of the colony. When we're distributing county grants, equity and access is extremely important. So we need to make sure that the community grants are reaching the diverse segments of the Montgomery County Muslim community, not just a subset of them. Kate Chance is a valuable member and our liaison for most of the faith-based communities in Montgomery County. So we are recommending that Faith Community Advisory Group should be given funds for staffing, not volunteers, not half staff, but they should be given funds for staffing so that those important multi-faith communication messages can go forth, they can engage, they can act, they can facilitate these conversations that we're having all the time. Next slide. Schools. Again, a lot of the answers that we got in the listening session and via the survey were related to schools and parents. And so we are recommending from a reporting perspective, just like we did for the county, the mechanism for kids and parents to report bullying is not clear. So it needs to be robust. It needs to be communicated to all the parents, and they also need to make sure that there is follow-up after that. In the training for teachers and staff, we need to have mandatory anti-Islamophobia content that is covered for them so that they are aware of how to deal with it in the classes. We need to have inclusive instruction where we are teaching about the contributions of the diverse community, especially with respect to the demographics of the class. We need to have anti-discrimination resources so that we can educate the parents on the school system's definition of bullying and make sure it is understood. We need to confront biased teaching when reviewing historic and current events that rely on reductive anti-Muslim narratives. So we will cover that later as well when we talk about major events that are going on in the community, just like Councilman mentioned earlier, that impact the kids in the schools. It directly impacts them. With that, I'll turn to Ambreen.
Who are American Muslims? One of the embedded questions that we felt we could not
Ambreen, I'm going to.
Sorry.
Sorry, this is Ilhan. I just want to, we were so excited about doing this presentation that we didn't really introduce ourselves. So I was thinking maybe if we could take a moment to introduce the cohort members and, you know, if you could just do that real briefly, then we can get to your part. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just mindful of time. I'm Ambreen Khan, and I am a member of the cohort. Adila?
I'm Adila, member of the cohort.
I'm Ilhan Kagri, member of the cohort.
I am Firdaus Kadir, member of the cohort.
And I think that's all. Thank you, Ambreen. I just wanted to make sure people were aware who we were. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Very important and appropriate, Ilhan, because we're going to get to who are American Muslims. And I think that we do reflect some of the diversity that exists within our county. Not all of it by any stretch, but a slice of that. So as we were listening to Adila's review of the recommendations, we wanted to put those at the top, thinking about why those recommendations and the priority as as a frame for as we go through this. For the solutions and recommendations, they're informed by a variety of things. The first I want to touch on are who are American Muslims. And here in Maryland, just a few facts. Islam in Maryland traces back to the 16th century. Muslims, according to demographers from a variety of institutions, are and believed to represent close to 2% of adult Marylanders. That doesn't include the kids, which is important, as you'll see when we get through this. Muslims in America and in Maryland are the most ethnically and racially diverse faith group in the United States, and it's one of the youngest. The spectrum of theological and cultural diversity is also reflected not only in research that's emerged, but also in the way our faith-based communities have grown. The recent population growth has been fueled by two dominant factors: immigration and higher than average birth rates within the Muslim community. And now that I'm running the slideshow, I have to be careful to make sure I'm staying up. The first, Muslims. And I found this to be a particularly powerful story here in Maryland. There was the story of Ayub Suleiman Diallo, who was enslaved in present-day Senegal, and he came to Annapolis, where he was enslaved and worked on a tobacco farm. His story, which he wrote, became somewhat of a bestseller in his day and is documented in this book, Muslims in America, which is the backbone for a PBS Islam in America series, which I encourage everyone to watch if you have not. It is a reminder again that here in Maryland, Muslims were part of the first to help build our communities. Brother Firdaus. You need to hold on, where you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. So the zooming in, looking into our local area, Montgomery County, Muslim organizations reflect growth. In 1970s, there were only 2 organizations registered. One of them was Muslim Community Center in Silver Spring. It was established in 1976. And the second one was ISWA, Islamic Society of Washington, which was established also in Silver Spring, Maryland in 1973. Today, we are looking at no less than 19 mosque masjid serving in our community in Maryland area, and we can see this from the map that can speak for itself. Can you swing back to the map?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Nope, it's moving in the wrong direction. Let me go back to the map. Here we go.
Thank you. And as we can see, this phenomenon growth is 900%, if not more. It's 9-folds of growth since 1973. So we are now, as we was described earlier, this is the Muslim community representing a very ethnic. You name of the background, we have them, and they are very engaged, socially engaged. We have many activities, reaching out, including interfaith dialogues, social activities, facing all kind of issue that we have in the communities, and we do that together. And this kind of phenomenon continues until today. And this is not to mention about the surrounding area. This is only immediate Montgomery County, because some people, some congregants or some members are going to another mosque that is in the adjacent area from Montgomery County. So DMV is the home of a diverse array of Islamic schools, mosques, and masjid, and community centers.
So what does that community look like? Well, one of the things that we want to really make sure that is understood is recent research on the American Muslim community really illustrates how young it is. It is younger than all other faith and non-faith groups surveyed by demographers. 25% of American Muslims are 18 to 29 years old. That is a significant population, and that has positive implications for our community, but it also creates an opportunity, I think, for all of us to think about engagement. In Montgomery County, that means that American Muslims are not only part of our educational system, they are going to be a vital force in our labor force. They will contribute, paying more taxes. They will be active in civic engagement, and we hope they will build their families here and continue to be part of this community. Who are American Muslims now? One of the things that we've talked about is the level of diversity. It is, again, the most ethnic and racially diverse group, and I've highlighted 2 points here to really illustrate this. 25% of American Muslims identify as either Black or African American. That is substantial, but if you look at it in contrast to the other numbers, there is no super majority of an ethnic or cultural group that represents Muslims in America. Another reality in terms of diversity, a massive survey of college students conducted by FIRE, which is the first individual rights and expression organization of over 55,000 college students around the country, found that also Muslims, college students who identify as Muslim, also indicated that a significant number, 15%, do not identify as straight. that you can see alongside other groups that were identified in that survey. But at the heart of what we're talking about, hate, and what Council President Evan Glass spoke about, having no room for hate and being able to create responsible processes and engaging in this process, we felt important to talk about the distinctions between Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry. In reality, those two terms are often used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Islamophobia is a way of understanding how fear of and I feel like I'm hearing an echo. Islamophobia is the integration of and systemic bias towards Muslims that's reflected in our legal system and structural bias. It has been documented, and it is most easily seen through state policies and practices. Tax dollars, for example, used to surveil houses of worship and community groups are often indicators to justify fear. That national security lens, securitizing the way that Muslims are perceived, erases the history of American Muslims, and it frankly minimizes the contributions that Black Muslims have made across our country and here in Maryland. How does it manifest anti-Muslim bigotry? Racialized discrimination of Muslims and those perceived to be Muslims. And that experience happens in banking, housing, workplace, and in civic spaces. And the negative stereotypes are reflected often in microaggressions. This othering often leads to extrajudicial behavior, vigilante behavior against Muslims and their institutions, as well as those perceived to be Muslim, including our brothers and sisters in the Sikh community, where you see a high incidence of bullying, intimidation, discrimination, vandalism, threats of assault, and violent assault. There is a collective sense of trauma and isolation in the community. And this leads to a decline in trust and a loss of faith in government and public service institutions. Now, I highlight this because it is something that we're going to touch on because we see it in some of the feedback that we received during our listening session and the survey. There's also a history. The Muslim community in Montgomery County has a direct experience of being surveilled. There was a state-sponsored surveillance and intervention project that was funded by the Department of Homeland Security. It involved an extensive network that included the Montgomery County schools, in which youth were identified by MCPS school guidance counselors, healthcare providers, and SROs to serve as, quote, conduits of information to identify potential youth who were seen as at risk for radicalization. The model was tied to the Office of Community Partnerships for Faith Community Working Group. Now, I want to pause here because this is important. This experience happened not in the distant past. This is 2014. And it is something that the community is aware of and remembers. Now, in the context of therapy sessions, young people were identified, and the reasons or the ways in which they were identified often had to do with expressing the following: homesickness, suffering from stress or feelings of alienation, and also economic stressors in the family. All of these indicators were used to identify and potentially get students involved into intervention programs. Now, the consequence of this program is it created distrust of school counselors and the police, a loss of trust in healthcare providers and mental health providers, and it raised questions about the relationship between the community and local leadership. There was also a concern about ideological values and political grievances that were perceived to be weaponized when shared in context of talking with a school counselor. And that all together fostered again an atmosphere in which expressing dissent is seen as a precursor to terrorism rather than a First Amendment right or a civil right. Houses of worship are targeted for threats, vandalism, and arson. This has been going on since 9/11, and this year we have seen again, more recently, 2 area houses of worship that received bomb threats. Today, the Council of American Islamic Relations issued a nationwide community alert, putting all houses of worship and those perceived to be associated with the community to be aware of growing threats targeted in response to the escalation of violence in Israel and Gaza. So what we found is that this experience of feeling racial and religious discrimination is in fact self-reported to independent demographers. The Institute for Social Policy and Understanding has been studying this for several years now. 62% report experiencing discrimination. That includes men and women, and they're equally likely to report facing such discrimination. They also experience it when applying for a job, interacting with law enforcement, traveling, seeking health care. They're also most likely to experience having, if they have children in the school, they report, 48% report in 2022 that their kids experienced bullying in the past year, and 1/5 report that that bullying occurred nearly every day. Where is it coming from? 64% report that it's from other students, 31% report online, and 42% report that it was by a teacher or a school official, 19% from a teacher or a school official online. We not only looked at the national data, we wanted to listen to some of the experiences here in Montgomery County. We had a Muslim cohort community listening session. Hopefully several of you were able to participate. Key issues that were lifted from that: microaggressions in the schools were not taken seriously. It wasn't until parents involved in the PTA were able to assist in advocating to produce accountability. Overall, an expression that there's a lack of transparency in what gets resolved after an incident report is made. Another reality which we're experiencing today is the impact of geopolitical events that lead to hate bias and a rise in hate incidents. Muslim worship centers, schools, and people who are wearing religious wear, headscarves and such, are easy targets. There is an additional issue that we heard in the listening session, which is a limited capacity and awareness on how to apply for the nonprofit security grants. For example, the statewide grants that were recently awarded, many of the nonprofits reached out and shared that they were unfamiliar with that process and had not known about it. In the Arab American and Palestinian community, many expressed a feeling that the recent adoption of an anti-Semitism resolution has been used to silence criticism of foreign governments' treatment of Palestinians. There was also a reaction to the feeling that by vocalizing expressions and concerns about curriculum and the recent opt-out controversy was treated as dismissive of faith sensitivities. We also did a survey online to complement what we heard in the listening session. Ilhan.
Yes, I'm going to take it over from here. So my name is Ilhan Kagri, and I want to just begin by thanking President Glass for being here tonight and for setting up this task force, and thank you to everybody else. In addition, one of our cohort members wasn't introduced in the beginning, and that's Imam Faisal Khan. And I'm sorry that we didn't have a chance to say hello to him, but welcome, Imam Faisal Khan. So as Adila mentioned earlier, and as Ambreen mentioned just a moment ago, not only did we do research into the sort of situation that Muslims are experiencing, but we also wanted to hear from our community members. So we had a listening session and we gave people an opportunity to respond with an online survey. And I'm going to be going through the findings of some of the findings that we got from this survey. So just real quickly, there were 46 respondents and they were very diverse in zip code all over the county, in age and race. Only 4% identified as Caucasian, 26% were foreign born, 52% have lived in Montgomery County for more than 20 years. The first thing is we wanted to know how they felt about their experiences, in the county. What's the temperature of bigotry in the county? And they were given two statements. One was, I don't experience any hate or bigotry because of my identity as a Muslim. And then on the other end, this year, I feel Muslims face more hate and bigotry when compared to prior years living here. And 38% felt closer to the I don't experience any hate or bigotry. 9% felt kind of in the middle of this statement, but 53% of the respondents felt that they were facing more hate and bigotry in this year than in previous years. We wanted to know if individuals had personally experienced hate or bigotry. So in response to that question, over half of the Muslims in Montgomery County have experienced hate and bias themselves personally because of their identity. We asked them if you reported the incident. So the majority of them, as you can see, close to 75%, actually 73.3% are not reporting the incidents of hate or bias. How about what other people are going through? Do you personally know anyone who has been a victim of a hate-motivated crime or a hate-motivated bias incident? So 59%, 60% said yes. So this is the feeling in the community that this is not an individual thing. This is a community-wide issue that everybody is aware of. There is hate and bias against the Muslim community in this county. We asked, we were thinking, why is it that people don't report hate or hate crimes? And we're thinking that maybe one of the reasons is they don't know how and where to report a hate crime. And sure enough, 40% of the people felt that they did not know how and where to report a hate incident or a hate crime. We wanted to know if they felt that the county needed to invest more resources to improve the social climate and address the rise of hate in Montgomery County. And yes, there's a whopping 69% that felt more resources need to be designated in this end. So we talked about microaggressions a little bit earlier, and I'm going to define them again. They're subtle actions that are often unintentional and brief, verbal or nonverbal actions that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults towards individuals or groups based on their race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and other characteristics. Now, the problem is that securitizing Muslims has become so commonplace that comments about Muslims being terrorists or violent or closed-minded are the norm. These microaggressions happen all the time. So the question, have you personally ever experienced microaggressions because of your identity? 67% said yes. And here's microaggressions against African-American Muslims. So we see the cross-section between being Black American and also being Muslim American. Questions like, where are you from, to an African-American? No, where's your family from? So these are all indications that African-American Muslims are not native to America. They must be immigrants. They must be of Arab descent. Other examples, where did you convert? In prison? Are you a Black Muslim like Malcolm X? So the idea that African-American Muslims must be criminals or must have converted in jail. Other microaggressions that are reported by students. Are you a terrorist? What are you hiding under your hijab? Is someone forcing you to cover your hair? The message that we're getting is that Islam oppresses women. Women are not capable of choosing their own religious beliefs. Islam is a religion of terror. and Muslims are stereotyped by the actions of a few bad actors. I can tell you that my own grandchildren suffer from these kinds of microaggressions. I mean, I have a granddaughter in the public school system, and she heard these things a lot, both in private school as well as in public school. More examples, but you do not wear hijab. Do you pray? So somebody, a woman who doesn't wear hijab, or somebody who doesn't look stereotypically Muslim but says they're Muslim, can't possibly be Muslim because we don't fit the stereotypical image of being a Muslim. This is also a microaggression. So let's move to the institutions that Muslims or everybody in the county should be looking for. And how do Muslim Americans of this county feel about their institutions? So to answer the question, do you feel confident that Montgomery County Public Schools are committed to combating hate? If you see, only 17.8% felt confident in the school system, less than 20%. Do you believe that if a hate crime or bias incident is reported to a teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools, that effective action will be taken within a reasonable amount of time? Only 18% of respondents express confidence that a teacher will take effective action. If we go to the police, do you believe effective and timely action will be taken if a hate crime or bias incident is reported to law enforcement or a reporting agency? 29% of respondents express confidence that law enforcement will take effective action. That's not a huge number. That's still a pretty low number. So there's little confidence both in the police and in the school system. Note, however, that there's higher confidence in police, almost 30%, when compared to teachers, 18%. And I think this is really something for the school system to look at, because Muslims are generally not more sort of afraid of police than the rest of the county institutions, and yet they feel confidence that the police will help them, and they don't have confidence in their teachers and in the school system. Another question in this survey: in your opinion, how effective are Montgomery County's elected leaders in raising awareness about the rise in anti-Muslim bigotry? So we've looked at the schools, we've looked at the police, so we're looking at elected leaders now. And given a range of just go back for a minute, Umbreen. Given a range of 1 to 5, 1 being not effective at all, 5 being very effective, here's the way that the people responded. 59% felt county elected leaders were not effective at all in raising awareness. And another 11.4% were close to that range. So 70% felt that Montgomery County's elected leaders were not effective in raising awareness about the rise in anti-Muslim bigotry. I want to say that President Glass should not fall into that category.
I want to just shift now to how geopolitics and, frankly, controversy locally at home has contributed and fuels some of the stereotypes and can distort some reality. There has been a lot of recent media coverage over the controversy around 3 families, one of which is Muslim, suing MCPS to remove books that include LGBTQ themes from the English language arts curriculum. This is the amount of coverage and the amount of advocacy around this has created a false perception that activism represents all Muslims. It is also important to remember that activism does not animate the full scope of civic engagement. One of the things that we heard repeatedly was the ways in which, over the last 30 years, the Muslim community has not only grown, but it's grown with its neighbors and has been engaged in supporting Montgomery County neighbors in a variety of ways, hosting food drives and supporting food distribution to address food insecurity, partnering to encourage vaccinations and support public health, specifically for underrepresented communities, including those who are members of the BIPOC community, offering health services, regular medical services for economically disadvantaged neighbors through clinics, assisting the resettlement of newcomers arriving from countries of conflict. These are just a few of the many ways that Muslim members of the community have been engaging. We know that there have been many Muslim parents engaging in the PTAs, in our local civic organizations, addressing a host of issues. So it is important to kind of recognize that some of the ways that Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry play in our community can also be amplified by, at times, distorted coverage. So at the end of this slide, we have included a series of references that we hope folks to learn a little bit more can find out and see what we learned. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of research. I'm going to go back to the front of the deck for a moment now, where we began, to just again review those recommendations. Based on what we heard and the listening session, as well as the survey, we identified, thinking again about our mandate as a task force, to offer actionable steps that the county council can engage in. This is engaging the community. This is engaging county government and agencies, mindful of the appropriate role that the county council can play. Throughout both of these slides and all of these recommendations is embedded a request to elevate the priority of integrating cultural competency and religious literacy in our collective work through all the various public service agencies. Some of the most disturbing stories we heard, as we've mentioned in the slide deck, were experiences our young people are having in the schools. All right, with that, I'm going to bring it back to the first slide. And I believe we'll open it up. Do we have time for Q&A?
Hi, Amberine. Yes, there's time for Q&A.
All right, so if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A, and I, along with members of the cohort, will do our best to answer them.
For those of who may not be aware, the Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen. It'll say Q&A, and you just go down there and type in your question.
Or if anybody wants to ask, just turn on your video and unmute yourself as well.
Ambreen, you might want to stop your screen share so we can see more people.
Absolutely. Here we go.
So there's a question. Hate speech often extends beyond physical actions into the digital realm. What strategies does the task force employ to address online hate speech and cyberbullying within Montgomery County?
Well, we absolutely heard that the hate speech is an issue that is experienced online. In the survey, we saw that as well. We heard that, especially engaging on social media platforms. The task force, our mandate was to provide recommendations to the county council and the leadership. Regulating online hate speech is not something that I know to be within the purview of the ability of the county council.
But certainly just in terms of attitude, right? In terms of countering this, going against hate, fighting hate, or trying to counter the attitude of hate, the county council can be effective in some of the trainings that we've been pushing for, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think attitudes is absolutely embedded in that. There's another question from James Stowe. Was there, do you want to ask the question or shall I read it?
Go ahead.
Was there one bit of information or attitude or perception that we found that was new or that we had not heard before during our research and community inquiry?
In other words, were there any surprises?
For me, the surprises were actually the experiences of feeling more trust towards law enforcement, given the experience of Muslim communities, specifically with surveillance. That was a bit of a surprise that there was a greater trust in the resources and going to Montgomery County Police, as opposed to navigating or escalating an incident with Montgomery County Public Schools. That was quite telling to me. And it was reinforced by both the listening session as well as some of the ad hoc comments that we received in the survey.
But while you go on there, is Montgomery County Islamic friendly?
Well, we asked that question in the survey. If there was a percentage of people in the survey, I believe it was, Ilhan, you can correct me, I believe it was close to 30%, was it 30% that felt that they had not experienced discrimination or hostility. So the survey, the digital online survey, did show that individuals who took the survey, not everyone had the same negative experience. I don't know if that answers your question. Ilhan, do you want to add anything to that?
I want to add to it a little bit. So as a visible Muslim, I can tell you firsthand that the climate and the attitudes of people change when there is something going on in the news. So the political environment definitely impacts the perceptions of Muslims. So we talk to our kids, we talk to ourselves, and we kind of brace ourselves as we go out of the house for dealing with hate, whether it's at the grocery store or at the gas pump.
There's another question. Many Muslim student associations have been expressing how school administrations have been against them in their solidarity with Palestine. Richard Montgomery High School principal asked the MSA to remove a statement they made on their social media. Sherwood High School principal made statements of bias toward one side of the conflict, and many other schools have been expressing difficulty with being able to freely have an opinion. How can the task force help address these issues?
Ilhan, you're on mute.
I was going to say that I think that President Glass spoke about that in the beginning, that we have to allow people to have their opinions. We have to allow people to disagree, as he said, without being disagreeable. And I think that, you know, the county has to foster that. And I think that it really behooves the county council and Montgomery County Public Schools, anybody that's in a position of leadership, especially now. This is a crisis situation, I think, for our county, because this is not something that's going to go away tomorrow. It's getting worse and worse. And, you know, the question, Mr. Stowe, when you asked earlier, 53% of the respondents felt that the sort of the climate of hate and bigotry was worse this year than in previous years. So it's not just anti-Muslim, it's just the climate of bigotry. You know, we see it throughout the country, and it certainly Montgomery County is not exempt from that. So they're feeling, you know, the residents of this county and the Muslim residents of this county are feeling it. But recent events have shown that anybody who looks Muslim, looks Arab, is Palestinian, is a Muslim, who might have views that, you know, regarding human rights, regarding civil rights, that these people can be bullied, that these people can be attacked for their views. And you know, I think that it behooves those people in positions of power to protect the rights of those people to have those views.
I would also add, I think that the student organizations and student groups, if they're being asked to not make solidarity statements or to, contract their own expressions, I think that one of the things that we heard in the listening session and on the survey was that the experience that Muslim students have are not the same in every school, that so much of the experience depends on the school building leadership. The attitude and orientation of the principal and the area superintendent. And so I think that in answering the question, Councilmember Glass, your message that you started us off with here, I think that acknowledging that and ensuring that all Montgomery County citizens and residents are hearing it is really important. I think that that is something that we also found, is that depending on who you know and where you are, you may not hear the message you just said. But I think young people need to hear it. And I think in particular, school leaders need to hear the importance of acknowledging that we have a community that is absolutely wrestling with and traumatized by the events that are unfolding, the scale of human suffering, the geopolitical tensions that are leading to the Council of American Islamic Relations to issue a nationwide warning to houses of worship is no different or distinct from our members, our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community, similarly calling for heightened security and attention at Jewish houses of worship that are visible. And I think that residents of Montgomery County need to hear that unequivocally from our leadership. I think that will then be heard by our school system. We are aware as we go through recommendations that the county council does not regulate Montgomery County Public Schools. There is a relationship, a funding relationship, but we recognize that the county council can't prescribe things to the school system. But I do think that the civic voice, the leadership that you have and that you offer, and that County Executive Mark Elridge can offer in this time to fill that vacuum and to illustrate and point to resources that exist for students in particular is really important.
One point that you did make, I think, is important to note as well. And that is that you showed a graphic, I believe, about the demographics of our Muslim community. And I don't think that, this is my own opinion, that persons who normally think about the Muslim community, we have already, I think, traditionally had one to think that all of Muslims come from either the Middle East or certain parts of Asia and other parts around the world, but I don't know that people necessarily see them as people of color. Can you speak to that at all? Is that just my thought or perception, or is that in fact, from your perspective, what's the experience out there, what you've been able to find from, and I see the data, but do you believe that we think this way in Montgomery County? I'm asking.
I'm going to give my other cohort members an opportunity to respond. I have a thought to share, but I don't want to jump in. I want to acknowledge that I've got other cohort members who also have points of view on this.
No, Imam Faisal, do you want to answer that? Because you have experience actually in your mosque. Do you think that people are aware that, a significant number of Muslims are African American?
Yes, we do have a significant amount of Muslims in our community of African descent. And as Muslims, we have to treat everyone equally, But sometimes, they may have their own political views, which we don't endorse. We, as a mosque itself, we don't endorse any political views, but we do share some of the concerns in both the Muslim and the Jewish communities, because it affects us all.
The question was, do you think that the general community is aware that 25% of African Americans are also Muslim? That I think, is that correct, Mr. Stowe? Is that the question?
Exactly, right on it.
Right, okay. I think if I could maybe respond to that, from my own experience, I think that the African-American community, the Black community is very aware that a large number of them have, sort of gone in and out through Islam, and some of them remain Muslim. Some of them have been Muslim from, the 1700s. Their families have been, and some of them have become Muslim in the 50s and 60s. And so I think that African-Americans in general have an affinity towards, as a Muslim, I feel that they have an affinity towards Islam. But I think you're right that the white community, the non-African community, white community in America does not understand that there is a large segment of the Muslim population that is Black.
If I may add to it as well, and I am from the Imam Center in downtown Silver Spring, Maryland. The founding of this organization is mainly Indonesian-speaking immigrant from Indonesia, but this place is visited no less by 2,500 to 3,000 people every week, whether it is regular prayer, or whether it is on Friday prayer or weekend. And in that numbers that coming in, a significant amount number of our frequent visitors at our mosque are African American. So the number of them is visible, but I think the core of the question is the work need to be done to make sure to eliminate the number of the 25% of Black or African American Muslim exist. And I think this is where we need to work on the social engagement more than ever we need it, because to create that awareness. But they are there. This is for sure. Coming from my particular mosque.
And if I could jump in here, this reality of the racialized perceptions of Muslim as being other there and not necessarily recognizing the scope of diversity, especially in Montgomery County and in Maryland in particular, I think is one of the reasons why, if you look at the recommendations that we made, that cultural competency and religious literacy are so important. I think the combination of sharing the infographic, which can be, those numbers are really helpful for painting a picture, but then having the stories of members of our community who represent that beautiful diversity that we have here and that we're home to, the map of all those different schools and masjids and mosques are also, when you look a little deeper, they are often hubs for the various ethnic and cultural groups that are represented, not to mention, and I haven't mentioned this, the theological streams that exist. Montgomery County is home to Ahmadiyya Muslims, Ismaili Muslims, Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims. It is not just the racial distinctions, but also the theological ones. And I think the public service announcement recommendation on thinking about how we communicate reporting hate, or how we think about communicating the religious diversity of Montgomery County as a point to celebrate is particularly important right now, because there is a growing number of residents, not just in Montgomery County, but across the country, who do not affiliate and were not raised in homes where religion is an identity, the so-called NONES. Because of that, religious literacy that you might get at home isn't happening. And we become even more vulnerable as households to adopting stereotypes and bias that's informed by dominant media coverage of geopolitical events, dominant story themes that paint certain communities in ways that are frankly negative. The opportunity, I think, and I like to go back to that, the opportunity is we have a climate of leadership in Montgomery County that is saying, let's address this, let's talk about it, which is why, again, we put our recommendations at the top of this presentation. Engaging and investing in cultural competency and religious literacy is a priority in most workplaces today. It is something that the federal government takes seriously. I think one of the areas that we felt there is room for a lot of improvement is in our public schools and in the way in which we think about all the various entry points for connecting to Montgomery County services.
Nice.
Now, there's another question from Mr. Ron Wright, did you capture any specific incident or incidents indicating the council member, or county agency was indifferent to the rise in Muslim hate bias? And it's a rather difficult question to answer. The reason being that what people said in the sessions and in the listening session and also online is that they felt, what's the point in reporting? That you can't do anything about it. Hate incidents is, what can somebody do about a hate incident? So they felt this sense of, sort of giving up. There's nothing you can do about it, so there would be no point. And there were people who said, yes, we did report it to a teacher, to a school administrator, and no action was taken. There are community members who have actually reported hate crimes to the police and felt that the police did not take effective action. Actually, they're on this call today. And there, during the listening session, there were people who went through the kinds of incidences that they had, and they did not get the closure that they needed. But let's put it that way. So there is this feeling that if you complain, you're not going to get any kind of resolution from that.
And I wanted, oh, sorry, Elhan, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, well, and I was going to add the issue of these microaggressions. That has to be something that the teachers have to be trained in. The teachers say things like, he was just joking. When students complain, they say, oh, he was just joking. Well, I mean, we wouldn't accept that for, other groups. We wouldn't accept that if a person made a joke about a gay person or a Black person or a Jewish person. We would say that's abhorrent. But when you make those kinds of jokes against against Muslims, then you say he was just joking. And I think that being made aware, being made more sensitive through training, and just requiring it from the teachers and making teachers more sensitive to that, I think is really important. Go ahead, Embry.
I was just going to add two specific instances because you were asking. One was absolutely related to a microaggression in which the teacher referred back to the parent and said, oh, the other kids were just kidding. It was talking about Arabs being terrorists. That was the message. And no, they weren't serious. They were just kidding. They were just kidding. So the teacher had the ability to say, no, this wasn't serious. We're not escalating it. It's not an incident that needs to be addressed at a school wide. It doesn't impact climate. So the signaling to that parent, but here's the point that I want to underscore that we heard in the survey. When one parent has that experience and then they go to Sunday school, or they go to Friday prayers, or they go to their community group where they find support, or their book club, and they're talking and they're sharing and they're getting support, and they share that experience, it reinforces this experience and that sense that there isn't a will to confront that kind of pervasive bias that they feel exists. And it's not happening, again, I just go back, it's not happening in a vacuum. After 9/11, the reorientation and equation of Muslims as terrorists came to Montgomery County through that Countering Violent Extremism targeting program. That slide, the report that's linked, I encourage every single person to read through it. Instances in which young people are identified had to do with a host of factors, including feeling excluded, feeling alienated, feeling isolated. So you're encountering or feeling targeted because of your racial and religious identity, perhaps also your national origin, perhaps also your ethnic identity. And then when that alienation is experienced and you express it to a counselor, that can become pretext for then being targeted as a potential radicalization threat. That wasn't 30 years ago. That was less than 10 years ago. And I think that's a really important thing for all of us to remember, that program, which included funds coming into Montgomery County into partnership groups that totaled nearly $750,000, produced exactly 30 some identified individuals referred to for additional intervention. But the ripple effect of that kind of program is not neutral. It is also in this context in which we're asking the community to trust the schools to raise awareness and to intervene when microaggressions or hate incidents occur.
Just wanted to share a time check. So we have about 5 minutes.
Bertha, quick question. Do we have somebody from MCPS on the
I
call?
do not see him on the call. We
Yeah.
can,
There's a question that is not something I know that I can't answer this question because I don't know Montgomery County Public School policy. But this has to do with statements that students make on their social media accounts.
I will share of course, the recording, the presentation, and also will flag the questions related to MCPS with Mr. Monteleone, who's been attending our full cohort meetings. Just, to make him aware, if the person who posted that question wants to send me their email, I will leave my email here. If you don't want to send that to me, then like I said, I will be raising the questions with MCPS.
Okay, great. There was also a question that perhaps someone from the county government can answer. How prepared is Montgomery County to handle any incident given the geopolitical tensions today in terms of training and engagement with the police and government employees? Is anyone able to address that?
I'll jump in real quick and say that we're all monitoring the situation. And there are various conversations publicly. There are various coming togethers and vigils and other types of gatherings that are happening not only here in Montgomery County, but across the DC region. And so what is happening in Israel and in Gaza is being felt here. And we're all trying to reconcile how we get through this and show solidarity. And these conversations and these convenings on this topic, as I noted at the very beginning, are extremely important. And I just want to personally express my gratitude to the members of this group and this cohort specifically. I thought the presentation was so enlightening to the same points I think that Jim Stowe mentioned, seeing the diverse tapestry that makes up our Muslim American community. And it is more than meets the eye, and it is more complex than people would believe. And so that is another function of this conversation, to recognize that we might not be able to recognize some of the diversity that is amongst us. And so nobody should be quick to judge, to call names, or to act hatefully. And so I see Kate just jumped on. I don't know if she has any thoughts as our faith liaison. I know that she's been working overtime over the last few days. I'll turn it over to Kate for some additional thoughts.
Thank you, Council President. So we actually are going to be announcing the House of Worship Security Grant, thanks to our council and our county executive, and that funding has increased. A maximum amount of House of Worship or a nonprofit is $20,000 to receive. That funding will go to security cameras and personnel. That announcement should go out tomorrow, which is, feels like divine timing in some kind of way, right? Of everything that's going on. The police are notified to what's happening. There is increased surveillance. If your House of Worship is concerned, we can absolutely make sure, or community, it doesn't have to be House of Worship. We can absolutely make sure that there's increased surveillance. There have been a few incidents that have happened already, which is incredibly unfortunate, but not surprising. We live in a diverse county, and so when something happens abroad, it impacts us here. But I would like to be supportive to you all as much as I can. And I know that Director Stowe has been really involved as well. And just any way that we can be helpful during this incredibly tense time, because we know things are going to continue, that this isn't just going to go away, and that, it's going to be brushed under the rug. And it's something that we need to work as a community to repair relationships and support one another.
Can I ask
if I may, to the question. We want to be present in our communities' lives. And I think that's the big thing right now for many of us, is that we have made, as I think the Council President has shared, a number of inquiries and conversations with folks, just make real sure that people know and are clear where we all stand on the issue of violence, regardless of where it comes from. There is no place for it. There's no place for hate in our community, as he said earlier. And so we're trying to convey that message to a number of leaders across this community. We'll continue to do so. But one of the things that we really talked about early on in this conversation was being present for each other. That when any of us hurt, all of us hurt. And all of us are responsible to kind of figure it out. Kind of figure out how we kind of get beyond the moment, get beyond the situation, the circumstance. And then, as been stated, Elon said this best, this is not going to go away tomorrow. This is an ongoing kind of issue we got to deal with. So I want all this group to know that our Committee Against Hate Violence, our chair, is on the line with us as well. And so she, along with our co-chair, vice chair, I should say, Craig Simon, all of us are having these conversations, and it'll be going on until we are at a point where we are at least sufficiently informed and aware of kind of where we are at this point in time. So please know that it's happening. I do want to underscore, Ms. Khan, your admonishment for some more public pronouncements. But I must say, folks, we cannot continually ask our schools to do all the heavy lifting. We cannot do that. Their main goal is obviously, as you well know, is the education of our kids. But we, the community, have got to take a larger share of this responsibility on these kinds of matters. We just keep heaving an awful lot on that particular institution to do so much. When we sometimes don't necessarily do what we believe to be, at least I believe to be our part in all of this. So I would just, as we begin to kind of go through this process, is to find ways that we can take a little piece of that recommendations that were made, to excellent recommendations that were made, that we could take some of that ourselves and as a community and invest our time and energies and efforts in them as well.
I have to agree with you, Mr. Stowe, that we can't put all the burden on the schools. And I just want to tell you that when my kids were going to school, I have 5 children, and they all went to Montgomery County Public Schools. And there were instances where teachers were unaware, and I had the time and the resources to be able to go and talk to the teacher and talk to the principal. But I do think that we're in a different place now, and that we are more mature than when I'm very old. So, this was years ago when my kids were in school. And I think we've gotten into a place where we can do things a little bit better, where it doesn't have to be on an individual level. And I think that given what's going on, the kind of sort of drastic things that are happening, around us since 9/11, that and in the last couple of days, that we have to be more aware. And certainly community leaders are good at reaching out to the schools and sort of making the schools prepared. But this has to be sort of even keeled. Some communities have more resources than other communities, and we have to make sure that that the schools don't sort of lean towards those communities that have resources and ignore those communities that don't have resources. Well, so we have to be even keeled and say, you know what, the school system and but Council President Glass, said that this is a diverse community. We have to make sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable in this community. We cannot allow people to feel bullied. And I have to tell you personally, I feel like I need to keep my mouth shut all the time. In the last couple of days, I feel like I can't talk or say anything, because if I even mention that, there's 2.2 million people in Gaza, half of whom are children, all right? I mean, I feel just that statement alone will give me such backlash that, it'll make me anti-Semitic, it'll make me, and, I have relatives who live in Israel. So, I mean, the whole idea that this statement, that I can't come up with this statement and not feel afraid. Somebody like me, people who know me, I'm, a very courageous person, have lived in war zones, and yet I'm afraid to make that statement. So how are children who are 12 years old or 15 years old, and we're not talking just about Muslim or Arab children, they're children for whom human rights is a big issue. There are children in our high schools who care about civil rights and human rights. And we don't want them to feel bullied or scared either. You know, we want to protect everybody. And so I think that we have to do a better job. And this is what I'm hoping will be the result of this task force.
Here.
I'd just like to add something very simple as well to something you said. You mentioned that schools shouldn't have to do the heavy lifting. One of the things I heard in the Muslim listening session, and then I attended a couple of town halls, youth town halls as well, especially the one in Germantown. One of the messages that was coming through very clear from the parents and the kids was, school is not listening. School is not listening. That was the message, right? So if kids are impacted and school is not listening, that's a very different problem. They don't have to solve everything. They have county, they have other resources, but they need to be listening. And the community needs to believe that the school is listening and doing something about it.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you to our Muslim cohort for that incredible, informative, and powerful presentation. I think we have reached the end of our presentation meeting. So Council President Evan Glass, do you want to finish us with?
No, I said what my appreciation, and I appreciate the conversation continuing beyond that. And it is going to continue beyond this conversation as well. And so look forward to hearing the report outs from the other groups. And then we are working our way towards a full meeting at the end of November. And again, having a full conversation at the council, where you will all be invited in December to provide all of these ideas and thoughts to all of my colleagues. So there's a lot to digest, but we have a few more weeks to go.
Thank you. And I will just remind everyone that our next full anti-hate task force meeting, it's on Thursday, October 26th at 7 p.m., where the Black African American cohort will be presenting their recommendations. So we'll see you again then. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.